At my mother-in-law's birthday dinner, she handed me a glass of wine with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. I watched her closely, then quietly switched the glasses. 30 minutes later, my father-in-law collapsed. I didn't say a word. I just sat there watching, calm, certain, because I knew exactly what she had done. And I knew it wasn't the first time. I played professional football for years. I know how to take a hit, but I also know how to run a perfect comeback play. And this time, the field wasn't turf. It was her own dining room. Stay with me, because by the end of this story, you might find yourself wondering, what would you have done in my place? If stories like this make you stop and think, hit the like button, leave a comment below, and subscribe. Because what I'm about to share isn't just personal. It's a lesson in power and truth, and what happens when someone finally pushes back. My name is Russell Carter. Most people know me as the guy who led Houston to a Super Bowl 8 years ago. Others recognize me from the sidelines now, hosting one of the top sports podcasts in the country, calling out the hypocrisy of the league, the silence around head trauma, the corruption buried in billion-dollar locker rooms. But few know what I've been through off the field. Fewer still know what it feels like to fight not just a system but a family, one that sees you not as a son-in-law, but a threat to their perfectly curated image. I met Sam Brady at a charity auction in Austin. She was elegance in motion, intelligent, grounded, with a laugh that pulled me out of my post-retirement haze. She didn't care about the cameras or the past seasons. She cared about the man who stayed late to help the janitor stack chairs after the event. We connected over values, not victories. A year later, we were married. And that's when the game really started. Not between us, but between me and her parents, Linda and Robert Manning. Robert Manning Sr. was a retired federal judge with a Rolodex of senators, CEOs, and skeletons. The man was used to having the last word, and I, according to him, was just a helmet-wearing gladiator with a microphone. Linda, on the other hand, was subtler, a master of high society warfare. She'd compliment my podcast's reach while reminding me that her friend's son made Forbes under 30 twice. She smiled through gritted teeth at our wedding, whispering to Sam afterward that she hoped I'd settle into something respectable now. At first, I chalked it up to nerves. Culture clash, a football guy marrying into a family of Ivy League brunchers. But as time passed, the digs became sharper. At family dinners, Robert would lean back and ask, "So, Russell, do you still think you're making a difference with all that locker room gossip?" Or he'd jab, "What's your next scoop, son? More drama from the showers?" Sam always defended me, but gently, carefully. I could see the tension in her smile every time they came over. I understood. These were her parents, and unlike me, she didn't grow up learning how to take hits for a living. Linda wasn't just critical. She was strategic. She controlled the guest list, the conversations, the framing of everything. She introduced me at charity galas as Sam's husband, the former quarterback, never by name. When I spoke about my work, she'd immediately changed the subject to her daughter's art exhibitions or Robert's memoir. I tried. God knows I did. I invited them to podcast tapings, brought them tickets to private games, offered them seats at events I spoke at. I even flew Linda to New York to be on a panel I was hosting about youth sports and mental health. She never showed. Sent a polite apology via her assistant. Said her hairstylist had rescheduled. The tension only grew when I turned down a lucrative brand deal from a sports betting company tied to one of Robert's old colleagues. "You're not a player anymore, Russell," Robert had snapped. "You're a brand. Act like it." But I wasn't interested in selling out. Not to a system that buried truth, nor to a family that believed control was love. I thought I could rise above it. I thought being kind would be enough. But I forgot one simple rule. When people like the Mannings feel their grip slipping, they don't let go quietly. And Linda? She didn't come to play. She came to eliminate the competition. It started small, as these things often do. A few misplaced comments. Linda would call Sam during our dinner dates, always with emergencies that couldn't wait. Foundation galas, sudden changes in board meetings, things she forgot to mention earlier. I'd overhear the conversations. At first they sounded harmless, but the pattern was unmistakable. Every time Sam and I made progress, whether it was launching our mentorship program for underprivileged athletes or just planning a long weekend away, Linda would insert herself, always with urgency, always just enough to derail the moment. Robert wasn't subtle. One Sunday brunch, he brought up Sam's ex-boyfriend, Ethan Rogers, a hedge fund guy with more suits than empathy. "He's doing well," Robert said casually over Eggs Benedict. "Runs his own fund now. Got married to a marketing VP. Shame, really. He and Sam had such potential." I caught Sam's jaw tighten. She said nothing, just refilled her mimosa. But I knew that tactic. I'd seen it on the field. Psychological warfare disguised as small talk. Then came the exclusion. Family photos without me. Invitations to events that Sam forgot to forward, only to find out Linda had addressed them to her daughter alone. "Oh, I thought you'd be too busy with your show," Linda would say with a smile when I brought it up. "You know, all that whistleblowing must be exhausting." It was like death by 1,000 cuts. Not enough to confront, yet always enough to feel it in your bones. But what really turned the tide for me was something I wasn't even supposed to hear. Late one night, I came home early from recording. As I entered the house, I heard Sam in her home office on the phone with her mother. The door was cracked just enough. Linda's voice floated through. "Russell means well, honey, but he's intense. All that obsession with corruption, it's not healthy. You need stability. You need someone who elevates you socially, not drags you into scandals." Sam didn't argue. She just went quiet. That silence haunted me. I started noticing the way Sam hesitated when talking about our future. She'd trail off when we discussed kids. Our podcast studio expansion, once a shared dream, suddenly became your project. I could feel her slipping. Not because of anything I'd done, but because someone else had been planting doubts for months, maybe years. Around the same time, a few of my public appearances were quietly sabotaged. A scheduled keynote I was set to deliver at a nonprofit was inexplicably reassigned. A podcast sponsor pulled out last minute after receiving ethical concerns about my content. At first, I thought it was just bad luck or politics, but then I caught a message on Sam's iPad. A forwarded email from Linda to the nonprofit board, expressing concerns about my past, controversial stances. She'd written it under a pseudonym, but the phrasing, the tone, it was unmistakably her. Still, I kept quiet. Not out of fear, but strategy. I wasn't going to confront a chess player in the middle of her opening gambit. I needed to let her overreach. I needed to let her believe I was still playing checkers. So I smiled at family dinners. I complimented Linda's lemon tart. I listened politely to Robert's stories about the good old days of the bench. But inside, I was already preparing my next move. Because when someone tries to erase you from your own life, the worst thing you can do is disappear. The night everything changed, I had just flown back from Las Vegas after a week covering the NFL Combine. I was running on 4 hours of sleep and too many airport coffees. My body ached. My voice was hoarse, and all I wanted was a quiet night at home with Sam. But she met me at the door with a soft smile and said, "We can't miss Mom's birthday dinner." I hesitated. She squeezed my hand. "Just a couple of hours, then we're home." So I changed into a dark button-down, splashed cold water on my face, and braced myself for another evening under surveillance. Linda's estate was its usual performance piece: elegant lighting, catered platters, curated playlists of vintage jazz that made everyone feel expensive. I brought a bottle of single malt whiskey as a peace offering. Linda took it without acknowledgement, directing the waitstaff with the precision of a general. Robert was in the corner, bragging to another former judge about the time he lectured at Yale. Dinner was predictably stilted. Sam tried to bridge the tension, asking about my latest interviews. Linda nodded along, barely listening, before redirecting the conversation to the gallery show she was curating for Sam's charity. "Ethan Rogers is one of the sponsors," she said casually, locking eyes with me. "Isn't that nice?" I took a sip of water and smiled. Small world. After dessert, Linda stood and announced she'd made her famous sangria, a tradition at her dinners. "Russell," she said, "I made a special glass for you, a little extra spice for the man of the hour." Something in her voice made me turn. I offered to help carry drinks. "You've done enough," she said sweetly, placing 2 glasses on a side tray separate from the rest. But as I stepped into the kitchen, I caught it, the flick of her wrist as she slipped something from her purse and stirred it into 1 glass. Her fingers moved quickly, and when she turned to face me, the vial was gone. I didn't say a word. I didn't confront her. I just looked at the glasses. One had a faint shimmer across the surface, like the light had caught a film floating on top. "I wanted to thank you properly," Linda said, handing me the tampered glass, "for being such a visible part of our family." I took both glasses, without a word, and returned to the dining room. Robert was mid-conversation about judicial ethics. I set the altered glass in front of him and handed the untouched one to Linda, feigning a mix-up. "Oops," I said. "Must have gotten them flipped." She paused just for a second, then smiled tightly. 15 minutes later, Robert looked pale. 20 minutes in, he loosened his collar, then stood abruptly. "Excuse me," he mumbled, and by the 30-minute mark, he was bent over the upstairs guest bathroom sink, retching violently as the sound of chaos filled the house. Linda shot me a glance from across the table, her lips parted slightly, her face frozen in a mask of disbelief. I held her stare, calm as stone, and took a slow sip of water. In that moment, she realized 2 things. I had seen what she'd done, and I had done something about it. But I didn't yell. I didn't accuse. I didn't need to. The silence between us was louder than any confrontation could have been. As Sam rushed to check on her father and the guests whispered nervously, I quietly pocketed the untouched glass I'd been given, the one that was meant for me, and I knew this wasn't over. Not even close. Because what Linda had just tried to do wasn't a moment of desperation. It was a move she'd likely made before. And now she'd finally met someone who knew how to read the play and call an audible. That night, after we left the Manning estate and got Robert to the hospital, where the doctor casually blamed a foodborne irritant, and Linda nodded along like an Oscar winner, I said nothing. Not to Sam, not to anyone. I drove home in silence, kissed my wife goodnight, and slipped into my home office with the glass still wrapped in a linen napkin. I set it on the desk like it was evidence in a criminal case. Because to me, that's exactly what it was. The next morning, I made one call. Not to law enforcement. No, I knew better than to go public too soon. I reached out to Dr. Elise Connors, a team physician I trusted from my playing days. She was sharp, discreet, and owed me a favor. "I need an analysis," I told her, "not for me, for the truth." I delivered the glass sealed, explaining only that it had been part of a suspicious reaction at a private dinner. She promised results within 48 hours. In the meantime, I went to work. Not podcast work, investigation work. I started digging through the quiet corners of Linda Manning's life. And what I found wasn't just troubling, it was methodical. For one, Linda had 3 separate active prescriptions for sedatives under variations of her name. L.E. Manning, Linda Brady Manning, and even one under her maiden name. All prescribed. Within the past 6 months, all filled at different pharmacies across the city. Some in neighborhoods I knew she'd never stepped foot in unless she was hiding something. But that wasn't all. I found a lawsuit buried in public court records, sealed, but not airtight. A former family housekeeper had filed a civil complaint 3 years ago, claiming psychological distress and unlawful medical exposure after working under Linda. The case was dismissed quietly. A settlement, most likely. The plaintiff had moved out of state. I reached out to a few contacts in Austin's social sphere, people I'd never paid attention to before because their world felt like a different game entirely. But now I was playing on their field. And they started talking. A country club scandal, a missing bracelet, Whispers that Linda had accused a neighbor's teenage daughter of theft with no proof, just to get her kicked out of their community, tennis league. And the most chilling, a story about Sam's ex-fiancé, Ethan Rogers. Most people believed Sam had ended it because Ethan was emotionally distant, but a close friend of Ethan's told me a different version, one where Ethan had been gaslit, made to believe Sam was cheating with evidence that never quite held up. He thought he was losing his mind, the friend said. Then one day he just disappeared from her life. We always wondered why. I didn't have to wonder anymore. 2 days later, Dr. Connors called. Her voice was steady, professional, but I could hear the concern under it. Russell, that glass had a high concentration of zolpidem. It's a sedative used for sleep disorders, but mixed with alcohol, it could cause blackouts, confusion, possibly even unconsciousness if you'd downed the whole thing. Nothing fatal, but enough to derail someone completely. Miss a podcast, miss a meeting, miss a flight, whatever you had coming the next day. She paused. You want a full report? Send it, I said. Everything in writing. And that's when it hit me. Linda hadn't just been trying to make me sick. She wasn't lashing out in a moment of rage or desperation. She was trying to sabotage something specific. I opened my calendar and saw it. The next morning, I was scheduled to fly to New York for a live segment on national television, an exclusive interview with an NFL whistleblower I'd been pursuing for 8 months. The kind of story that would have put my show on the map, the kind of exposure that made people take you seriously outside of football, the kind of spotlight that Linda Manning hated. This wasn't personal rage, it was calculated strategy. Linda hadn't just tried to poison me, she tried to poison my momentum, my reputation, my future. And I knew then with absolute clarity that confronting her wasn't enough. I had to dismantle the entire illusion she'd built around herself. But not with anger, with proof, with precision, and with the same cold discipline I used to run a 2-minute offense under pressure. Because she wasn't the only one who knew how to plan a takedown. Linda didn't waste time. The morning after Robert's mysterious illness, I received a text from her, unusually warm. Thank you for your grace last night. We're lucky to have you. Would love to speak, just us, for a special project I'm organizing. My stomach turned. I didn't respond immediately. I knew this wasn't reconciliation, it was bait. Later that afternoon, Sam mentioned it casually over coffee. Mom wants you to shoot some portraits for the new Manning Foundation page, she said, surprised. She said she trusts your eye, that she's ready to move forward. I nodded, kept my tone even. Sure, let's give her what she wants. But I wasn't bringing a camera for portraits. I arrived at the Manning estate alone the next Saturday morning, camera bag in one hand, a sealed manila envelope in the other. Linda greeted me like we were old friends, wearing a crisp cream blouse and subtle diamonds. Her voice was light, cheerful, polished. Public Linda. We'll use the atrium, she said. The light's perfect this time of day. I didn't set up my gear right away. Instead, I pulled the envelope from my bag and placed it on the marble table between us. Before we start, I said quietly, I think you should see this. Her smile tightened. She opened the envelope and scanned the documents. Dr. Connors' toxicology report, 3 pages of pharmacy records with her aliases and screenshots of online orders for sedatives from unverified sellers. She didn't speak for several seconds. Then, this is absurd, she said, her voice sharp but low. You're not seriously accusing me of… We both know what happened, I interrupted, my tone calm. But I don't know why. Help me understand that part. Her eyes narrowed, her posture stiffening. You want the truth? She snapped. Fine. You are becoming a liability. Sam worships you. She listens to every word you say. And now you're starting to threaten more than just the family name. You've got politicians calling out their donors on your show. You're about to become a national voice. And with that comes scrutiny. More attention. More exposure. And frankly, I'm not interested in having my entire life dragged out because of some ex-quarterback's podcast. I raised an eyebrow. So you drugged me? It wasn't going to hurt you, she said, defensive now. Just delay you, make you miss that big segment. Let Sam see that you're unreliable, maybe push her to rethink things. Rethink her marriage, you mean? She shrugged. She's impressionable. There it was. The mask had slipped. For the first time, I saw Linda not as a cold, manipulative socialite, but as someone truly terrified of losing control. Her power didn't come from love or respect. It came from orchestration, from carefully arranged illusions where she played the conductor and everyone else danced to her tempo. I stood, reached for my camera bag. Here's what's going to happen, I said evenly. You're going to tell Robert what you did. You're going to stop interfering in our lives, and you're going to treat me with respect. Not because you suddenly believe in me, but because the alternative is Sam finding out who her mother really is. Linda's jaw clenched. She tried to laugh it off. She'd never believe you over us. I met her eyes. Maybe not, but she'll believe a toxicology report, prescription records, security footage. And you know what? So will your foundation board. So will the Austin Women's League. So will every publication that ever printed your name. Her mouth opened slightly, then closed. I didn't need a response. I just walked out, leaving her alone with the documents. I didn't look back. But the next move, that wasn't hers anymore. It was mine. I didn't expect Linda to go quietly, and she didn't. That same evening, Sam came home tense, eyes narrowed in confusion. She tossed her bag onto the couch and looked at me like she was searching for something on my face. Did something happen with my mom? She asked. I kept my expression neutral. Why? She called me crying, Sam said. Said you were aggressive, that you accused her of trying to poison you, that you threatened to ruin her reputation if she didn't cooperate with something. She looked at me hard. Did you? I took a deep breath. The moment I'd been trying to avoid, hurting Sam, had arrived anyway. She didn't tell you what was in the wine, did she? Her eyes flickered. What are you talking about? I pulled the toxicology report from my drawer and handed it to her, saying nothing. She skimmed the first page. Her hand went to her mouth. No, she whispered. This can't be real. It is. And I didn't tell you because I wanted to be sure, because I didn't want to believe it either. She sat down, the paper shaking in her hands. Why would she do this? She wanted to stop the interview. She didn't want you believing in me more than her. She wanted to slow me down, cast doubt. She said as much. Sam looked broken, suspended between outrage and disbelief. She said you threatened her. I gave her a choice, I said calmly. Tell the truth or I would. But the damage had already begun. Over the next week, the air in our home thickened with silence. Sam avoided questions. She took longer drives, returned later from work. I'd hear her in the other room on the phone with Linda, soft tones, broken sighs. Some nights she cried in the shower. Other nights she said she was fine and curled up in bed facing away from me. It was the kind of emotional drift you feel in your bones. Too slow to track, too deep to fix with words. Then one night I overheard her on the phone again, this time with Ethan Rogers. I didn't mean to eavesdrop, but when you hear your wife mention another man's name in a hushed voice, instincts take over. I don't know anymore, she said. Everything feels heavy, like I'm carrying two people's truths and I can't hold them both. That sentence gutted me, not because I thought she was betraying me, but because I knew Linda had succeeded in planting the seed. Doubt. It grew in small ways. Sam began suggesting I take a break from the podcast. You've been so intense lately, she'd say. Maybe you need space. Time to reset. I could tell she meant well, but the words weren't hers. They were Linda's, repackaged and delivered in Sam's soft voice. I buried myself in work, recording back-to-back episodes, editing late into the night, scheduling interviews, drowning in something I could still control. But I wasn't sleeping, I wasn't eating right, and I knew I was losing her, slowly like a tide retreating under the pull of a silent moon. Then, on a Thursday night, I received an anonymous email. No subject line, just a Dropbox link and a single sentence. You should see this before it's too late. I hovered over the link for a moment, then clicked. It was footage, grainy but clear, from a hallway security camera. The date matched Linda's birthday dinner. The angle faced the kitchen. There she was, Linda, alone, uncorking the wine, pouring it into 2 separate glasses. Then the quick flick of her hand, the vial, the stir, the disappearing act. Then the next file. Audio only. Linda yelling at Robert, "You weren't supposed to drink it, you idiot." His voice rising. "This isn't the first time, Linda. You've done this before. You're going to destroy her life like you destroyed everyone else's." I watched the footage 3 times, then 4, then again with the audio. There was no denying it now, no room for interpretation. And yet I still hesitated, not because I doubted the truth, but because I feared what it would do to Sam. Because this wasn't just about me anymore. It was about her entire world unraveling. The version of her family she had clung to, redefined in seconds. And I knew, if I revealed this now, there would be no going back. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the living room, the video files looping on my laptop, the audio burned into my ears. Outside, Austin's skyline flickered in the distance, oblivious to the storm tearing through my home. The silence between Sam and me had become a second presence in the house, something dense, living. I knew what I had to do, but I also knew it would collapse the last fragile thread tying Sam to the illusion she'd spent her whole life preserving. By morning, I had a plan, but first I needed to confirm the source of the footage. I checked the metadata. The files had been pulled from a private home surveillance system, Linda and Robert's internal network, which meant someone close, someone inside, had leaked it. I cross-referenced the IP address from the anonymous email. It matched a mobile hotspot registered to a former household employee, Marissa Owens. Marissa had been the Mannings' live-in nanny years ago, before she quietly disappeared after a family dispute. I remembered her vaguely from a few holidays, discreet, warm, professional. I found her current address through a contact at a staffing agency and showed up at her small condo on the east side that same afternoon. She opened the door with tired eyes but didn't look surprised. "I figured you'd come." "Why now?" I asked, holding up my phone. "Why send this to me?" She stepped aside and motioned me in. Her living room was modest but spotless, filled with signs of a quiet, independent life. "Because I've seen what they do to people who get too close," she said, "and I couldn't watch them destroy another good person." Marissa sat across from me and laid it all out. How Linda had once accused her of emotional manipulation after she became too close with Sam during a difficult time in college. How Robert backed his wife without hesitation, cutting off Marissa's references and pushing her out of Austin's domestic staffing circles. "I lost everything," she said flatly, "but I kept the access code to their home network. I couldn't let it happen again." She told me there were more files, clips of Linda subtly sabotaging Sam's past relationships. One video showed her coaching a friend's daughter on how to flirt with Ethan Rogers, then sending the footage to Sam anonymously. Another clip showed her rehearsing lines with Robert before a confrontation with Sam about a job she had accepted without their blessing. They had rehearsals, for manipulating their daughter. I asked Marissa why she hadn't sent this to Sam directly. She shook her head. "Because she'd think I was bitter or trying to get revenge. But if you show her, she might finally believe." We organized the footage, labeled and time-stamped everything. I compiled it into one clean presentation. Security, videos, audio clips, screenshots of Linda's fake accounts, even background checks on her pharmacies. It wasn't just compelling, it was airtight. Still, I wasn't ready to confront Sam with it. Not yet. I needed to show her that this wasn't about jealousy, or tension, or in-law resentment. This was about truth, about protecting her from something far darker than simple parental overreach. That night I told Sam we were having guests for dinner. She raised an eyebrow but didn't ask. I reached out to Marissa. I reached out to Owen, Sam's older brother, who had always seemed just skeptical, enough to listen. I asked them both to come. No details. When they arrived, Sam was already seated at the table, confused but polite. "What's going on?" she asked, eyes darting between faces. I connected my laptop to the TV. "There's something you need to see," I said. "And I'm asking you to just watch. No interruptions. No questions. Just watch until the end." I hit play. For the next 45 minutes, nobody spoke. The footage rolled. Linda in the kitchen with the wine. Linda, whispering into a phone about manipulating Sam's perception of Ethan. Robert muttering lines under his breath. Then the audio. "You weren't supposed to drink it, you idiot. You've done this before." She'll think it was her idea to leave him. Owen sat back in his chair, hand over his mouth. Marissa looked away, unable to meet anyone's eyes. Sam just sat there, unmoving, her eyes locked on the screen, expression unreadable. When it ended, the silence in the room was thunderous. Finally, she whispered, "That was our house." I nodded. "And that was your mother?" She turned to Owen. "Did you know?" He shook his head slowly. "I always thought they were intense, controlling. But not like this. Never like this." Sam looked back at the screen, frozen on Linda's, face mid-lie. "They tried to destroy my marriage," she said, her voice a mixture of fury and grief. "Just like they destroyed everything else." And in that moment, I knew the shift had begun, not just in her, but in all of us. The illusion was broken, and no one, not even Linda Manning, could put it back together. The following day, the house was still heavy with the aftershock. Sam hadn't said much that morning, just sat on the edge of the bed, cradling a mug of coffee she never drank, staring at the floor as if the carpet might offer answers. I didn't push. I knew the questions forming in her mind had no easy resolution. What was real? How much of her life had been orchestrated? What had she unknowingly allowed? That evening, she came into my office quietly. "They need to see this too," she said. "In person. All of it." "You sure?" I asked. She nodded. "If I don't say it to their face, I'll always feel like I let them win." We agreed. It had to happen at their house. It was symbolic, yes, but also practical. We needed them. In their own castle when the walls finally fell. The next day, I called Robert and Linda. "We'd like to come over, all of us, tonight." There was a long pause on the line. Then Robert said, "Is this about that foolishness from last weekend?" I said nothing. Silence, after all, is its own kind of power. He cleared his throat. "Fine, 8 o'clock." We arrived as the sun dipped behind the hills. The Manning estate cast an expensive golden light. Owen and Marissa came with us. I brought my gear, not to film for show, but to document the truth. I told them it was for family records, and when I started setting up a small tripod in the living room, Robert's eyes narrowed. "What's this about?" "This is a conversation," I said, "that needs to be remembered." Linda walked in from the kitchen, perfectly composed in cream cashmere and pearls. She saw Marissa, and the flicker in her eyes betrayed her shock. "You," she said almost to herself. "We're not here to yell," Sam said firmly. "We're here to understand, and to make sure there's no more confusion." I nodded toward the screen. I played the video again, this time for the people who had caused it. I didn't stop, didn't flinch. I let every frame roll, Linda spiking the wine, the argument with Robert, the leaked messages, the phone recordings, the whispers of manipulation. I watched them as they watched themselves, expressions shifting from disbelief to defiance to pale, hard silence. When it ended, Linda crossed her arms. "This is a violation," she said coldly. "You've invaded our privacy. You've turned a family disagreement into a courtroom circus." Sam stepped forward. "This isn't about privacy. This is about control. You've been trying to control my entire life, my choices, my relationships, my reality." Robert raised a hand. Sweetheart, you're letting your emotions cloud your judgment. That footage could be doctored. Don't, Owen cut in. His voice was sharper than I'd ever heard it. Don't insult us. Don't pretend you don't recognize your own voice. I've spent my entire life watching you two manipulate people. I just never thought I was one of them. Linda's voice cracked. We did it to protect you, to protect the family. From what? Sam asked. From happiness? You don't understand what the world expects of families like ours, Robert muttered. No, Sam said. I don't. And I don't want to. She turned to me then, her hand finding mine. You were right not to tell me everything all. At once I had to see it, feel it, and now that I have... She faced her parents again. You don't get to be part of my life until you're honest. Until you stop trying to rewrite every chapter you're not the hero in. Linda's lips quivered. You're our daughter. And I always will be, Sam said. But that doesn't mean I belong to you. I handed Robert a small USB drive. This has everything. You can keep it. We're not going public with it, not yet. Because unlike you, I'm not interested in destroying people to win. Robert looked at me, something between rage and reluctant respect in his eyes. Why are you doing this? Because I want peace, I said. But I won't accept a version of it built on silence and fear. We left without shaking hands. That night, Sam and I sat in the car outside our house for a long time. Neither of us said anything. We didn't need to. We had done what needed to be done, not out of revenge, but to reclaim something neither of us had realized was being taken, our narrative. And for the first time in a long while, we weren't the ones carrying shame. They were. The days that followed were oddly quiet. No angry phone calls, no emotional outbursts, just silence. A kind of strategic retreat. Robert and Linda didn't reach out, and we didn't expect them to. It wasn't over, not really, but the balance of power had shifted and everyone could feel it. Sam moved through the house differently now. Straighter posture, more deliberate movements, like someone who had finally taken off a weighted vest she didn't know she'd been wearing. We focused inward. Therapy sessions, just the two of us. At first, then together. Honest conversations, some of them painful. Sam admitted things I hadn't known. How often her mother had rewritten her memories. How her father had dismissed her instincts until she stopped trusting them. I've been living on a script I didn't write, she told me once during a session, her voice barely audible. And for a while, I think I resented you for not fitting the lines. I didn't blame her. I just listened. Because if this experience had taught me anything, it was that healing doesn't come from proving someone wrong. It comes from being present when they're finally ready to see the truth. Owen reached out often now. We'd never been particularly close before, but that changed. I owe you, he said during one late-night call. Not just for Sam, but for me. They almost broke my marriage too, and I didn't even see it until you held up the mirror. Meanwhile, Marissa found new work at a nonprofit that supported women exiting abusive family systems. Sam recommended her personally. She saved me, she said simply. I want her to help others now. And Linda and Robert, they kept their distance. But we started hearing things, quiet shifts in their social circle. A foundation board seat quietly revoked. A friend of Linda's declining to co-host a gala. No one said anything directly, but in circles like theirs, silence can be the sharpest blade. Then, 2 weeks after the confrontation, an envelope arrived. No return address. Inside was a handwritten letter from Robert. I recognized the script instantly. It wasn't an apology, not exactly, but it was something. It read, "You were right to call us out. We lost sight of what mattered. We thought control meant care. We were wrong. I don't expect forgiveness, but I hope in time you'll find your own way to peace, with or without us." Enclosed with the letter was a deed transfer. The house Sam and I had been renting, our home, was now legally in our name. Signed, filed, no conditions, we didn't say anything about it. Didn't call, didn't write back. But I understood what it meant. Robert wasn't trying to make amends. He was trying to concede quietly, in a way that didn't require him to bleed in public. Linda never followed up. No calls, no messages. But Sam got word through a cousin that her mother had stepped down from several board positions, citing personal health reasons. We weren't naive. We knew this wasn't transformation. This was containment. They were minimizing fallout, repositioning, adjusting their narrative, just as they always had. But the important part? They were no longer adjusting ours. Our lives settled into something resembling normal. The podcast grew. Sam's gallery gained press not because of her family's name, but because of her eye, her voice. The air in our home was lighter, the shadows fewer. We'd walked through something ugly together. And we'd come out clean. Not unscarred, but whole. Sometimes victory doesn't come with a parade. Sometimes it arrives in a sealed envelope with a single signature and no apology, and sometimes that's enough. A few months later, as spring settled gently over Austin and the wildflowers began pushing through the cracks in the sidewalks, Sam told me she was pregnant. We were standing on the back porch, barefoot, coffee in hand, watching the sun rise over the oaks. She reached for my fingers and placed them on her stomach. "I'm about 7 weeks," she said, her voice soft, unsure. I stared at her, stunned silent for a moment. Then the weight of it hit me. Not just the news, but everything. It meant everything we'd come through, everything we'd built that no one else could touch now. I didn't speak. I just held her close. That moment was louder than any victory I'd ever had on a field. When we told Owen, he teared up. Marissa brought us a tiny knit blanket 2 days later with a note that said, "For the next chapter, may it be yours alone." Even the silence from Robert and Linda felt different. Not hostile, just distant, watchful. They didn't call, didn't write. And that was fine. Then, about a week before Sam's second prenatal appointment, another letter came. This time with a formal embossed seal on the envelope. Manning, Weaver, and Associates. Inside was a brief legal document from Robert's law firm. It contained the creation of a trust fund in our unborn child's name. No strings, no conditions, just a gesture signed and witnessed. Attached was a note. Not handwritten this time. Typed, brief, clinical. "Your child deserves a life unburdened by our mistakes. This is not an apology. It is a responsibility. Do with it what you will." I handed the paper to Sam without a word. She read it twice, then folded it neatly and tucked it into a drawer we rarely used. "We'll decide later," she said. "Right now, I just want to feel happy and safe." And for the first time in a long time, we were both. We didn't talk much about Linda and Robert after that. They didn't try to insert themselves. They showed up at the hospital the day Eliza was born, just once, stayed for 20 minutes, brought flowers and a silver baby spoon, took a few photos under Sam's watchful eye, then left. Linda didn't comment on the nursery. Robert didn't mention college funds or future schools. They both kissed Eliza's forehead and walked away like guests who knew not to overstay their welcome. In the months that followed, their presence remained subdued. A birthday card here, a short email there. No sudden visits, no passive-aggressive invitations. The air had changed. The rules were finally clear. Sam and I focused on our new reality. Late nights with Eliza, early morning feedings, baby socks lost in the laundry, the small, quiet chaos of real family, built on respect, not hierarchy. And as I stood over Eliza's crib each night, watching her tiny chest rise and fall, I felt something I hadn't allowed myself to feel since the first time I met her grandparents. Peace. Not because I'd won some battle, but because I'd chosen not to fight it the way they expected, because I'd built a life too solid for them to shake, stone by stone, truth by truth. We didn't need their approval. We never had. And neither would Eliza. That summer, I found myself standing alone in the middle of my podcast studio late one night, the only light coming from the mixing board and a small desk lamp. Eliza had just fallen asleep after one of her infamous 2 a.m. crying spells. and Sam had finally drifted off beside her. The house was quiet in a way it hadn't been for a long time. Peaceful, honest. I sat down, turned on the mic, and hit record. Not for an episode, just for myself. Because I realized something no coach, no teammate, no therapist had ever been able to articulate clearly to me. The most satisfying revenge isn't confrontation. It's freedom. It's knowing that the people who once tried to shape you, shame you, or shrink you have no more space in your decisions. It's understanding that walking away with your integrity intact is stronger than any verbal takedown could ever be. Robert and Linda didn't change, but we did. And that was enough. I'd spent a career learning to anticipate hits, to outmaneuver opponents, to run headfirst into chaos without blinking. But nothing taught me more about strength than refusing to match their darkness. Linda tried to break my momentum, my credibility, and nearly cracked my marriage in half. She failed, not because I fought fire with fire, but because I didn't. I held the line, I gathered the facts, I waited. And when the time was right, I told the story. Because at the end of the day, that's who I am. Not just an athlete, not just a broadcaster. I'm a storyteller. And sometimes the only justice you can give to a manipulator is to take their narrative away. The house we live in now is ours, legally, emotionally, spiritually. No ghosts in the corners, no shadows on the stairs, just laughter, late-night feedings, and new memories we get to write without anyone editing the script. And as Eliza grows, I'll teach her what I had to learn the hard way. That real power isn't in controlling others. It's in knowing who you are, setting your boundaries, and never letting someone else define your worth. If you've ever had to choose between peace and pride, between keeping the peace and protecting your truth, you're not alone. And if this story resonated with you even just a little, leave a comment below. Share your experience. Because sometimes telling your story is how the healing begins. And if you're new here, consider subscribing. There's more to come. Stories that don't just entertain but reveal.